Good afternoon, friends. John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about something a little different here. This is something that I was talking about doing a while back, and I found that this was, a good chance to kick this off. I do, as artists start to come out with some new albums in the next couple of months, want to kind of rank their discography and, talk through my thoughts a little bit further about them. And this new MGMT album is coming out this week at this point by the time that this video goes live. And I figured I would just run through their discography, which is not the lengthiest. It's only 4 studio albums. However, my thoughts on these albums are, a little all over the place. Some have changed quite a bit over the years. Some have not changed at all. So without further ado, today I'm going to be talking through MGMT's discography, who, if you don't know, are a Connecticut-based indie pop and indie psych project fronted by Andrew Van Witgarden, Benjamin Goldwasser. They've been at it for quite some time now. And I do quickly want to, just as a kind of honorable mention, point out their live album that they put out, I believe last year, 11/11/11, which I have listened to a few times. And God, I don't want to be like that guy and say that, I don't know, you had to be there to enjoy this project, but for a live album from MGMT, I expected quite a bit more, mostly just in the personality department, which is something that I've always thought was one of their biggest strengths. It's why I enjoy the projects from them that I do so much. It's an okay live offering. There's some interesting moments, and we are living in an era for the band where they are trying a lot of new things, and I do respect that, but the live album's never been for me. So at number 4 in their discography, I am going to put their self-titled album, and this was not really a hard decision for me because this is an album that when it came out, I ran from my freaking life from. I, listening to this album back in 2013, thought there was no possible coming back from this album. I almost just wrote MGMT off completely after this. I don't know what's happened here, because this is around the time where they really started letting their freak flag fly. I mean, they'd always been dabbling in psychedelic rock and psychedelic pop and neo-psych. That's been their thing since day one, blending that with the modern indie sound. But on their self-titled album, why does it have to sound like crap? I mean, God, tracks like Your Life Is a Lie, from a distance, do have the standards of, other MGMT offerings, but I feel like they just sound so awful. The production throughout this whole album is just really not pleasant on the ears at all, and the songwriting, this is by far the band at their least. And even leading up to this thing, the singles like Alien Days just really did not rub me the right way. And like I said, they were in a very experimental point in their discography, and they'd only get even more experimental with their follow-up record. But at the time, this was such a departure from the sort of clean sounds that, that had really populated their first 2 albums, which at the time, I hadn't even come to terms with yet. This album, to me, is just, it's not good, and I have to re-listen to it for their new album that's coming out soon, and I'm not looking forward to that, but this, to me, is their worst album. At number 3 in their discography, I'm going to put Oracular Spectacular, Calm Down. I don't think it's a bad album at all. I actually think it's a fairly underrated recording, and I didn't think that at the time. As a matter of fact, I do remember it took me a few years to really listen to this album. I had heard the singles, I had heard Time to Pretend, and I had heard Kids, and I thought they were good, but I thought a full-length album could get a little obnoxious at times, and that was my initial thoughts. Some of the indie-leaning moments on this album really did rub me the wrong way. I do distinctly remember thinking tracks like The Youth were really just I don't know, just kind of more annoying than anything. However, I do kind of think that this is an underrated project. In the grand scheme of things, this was pretty groundbreaking at the time. Not reinventing the wheel, but to have a band at the time, take the modern indie sound that was, not really, losing any steam, but really pump up the color, pump up the personality, bring in some wonky production and weird songwriting ideas. That's, there's a lot going on here, and a lot of the singles have gone on to be pretty timeless. Not only that, but deep cuts like Weekend Wars and Pieces of What have become some of my all-time favorite MGMT tracks. Now, I will say this, the only reason that this album is going in at the number 3 slot in their discography for me is this is by far, not them at their weirdest. And with their next 2 albums in their discography that we're going to be chatting about, they are much more genuinely strange, freakish, out there albums. And, at the time, I didn't know how that was going to pan out. However, Oracular Spectacular, I do love it. I do think it's a little underrated, but it's just not my favorite in their discography just because they have much weirder material coming down the pipe. All right, coming up next in their discography at the number 2 slot, I am going to give it to 2010's Congratulations, an album that, if you would believe it, if Oracular Spectacular took me about 2 years to really listen to and enjoy, it probably took me about 3 or 4 years to really listen and come around to Congratulations. I mean, I liked their debut and knew that going into this album, but at the time, I really didn't know where the band was going to take their sound, and I thought that going down too far down the rabbit hole into the psychedelic world would ultimately end up in their defeat. But shut my mouth, because the amount of risks that they took on Congratulations, I don't think it goes, I don't think it gets enough credit. I mean, some of the longer cuts on here, like Siberian Breaks, and some of the genuinely twisted, absolutely freakish tracks like Flash Delirium. I mean, this is MGMT really getting comfortable with letting loose in the studio. There's some progressive rock on here. There's a lot of surf rock here as well. This is the band really just coming into their own in a lot of ways and doing it in a really catchy, sort of very accessible way still. I honestly didn't know they had it in them at the time. But clearly they do have it in them, because with my number 1 album in their discography, I do want to give a shout out to their last album, Little Dark Age. I thought that this thing, when it came out, was their best album, and, being able to sit with it for a few years now, hell yes, this is their best album. This is by far the band going full psych, full absolute freaking weirdo on us. And leading up to this thing, once again, I really did not know the direction that it was going to be going. I mean, the Little Dark Age single seemed to be making some nods to classic gothic pop, while other tracks like Me and Michael and Hand It Over much fit the bill in the hypnagogic pop world. But as freaky as this album is, there's one thing that I've always really enjoyed about it, and that's put it over the top for me. But I think what brings me back to this album time and time again is the personality here. I mean, MGMT, not only are they having fun and really just letting the more experimental, weirdo side of their music really fly, at the same time, this album is really quirky. I mean, some of the one-liners here are really funny, really kind of introspective, really self-deprecating at times. It is very, very much a quirky album, and as weird and twisted as it does get at times, it's always sort of inviting. And consistency-wise, this is the band taking the most risks and having the most of them paid off. I actually think that I like it better than I did when I first reviewed it years ago. Now, this new album that's coming out this week, it does sound like it is going to be one of their most consistent efforts from a distance, because every time they've dropped a single leading up to this thing, they've been dropping something fierce. I am fully expecting this to be their most throwback psychedelic rock sort of 70s sounding record yet, at least from what I'm getting from the singles here. But I can't wait to hear about it, and you know where you're going to hear about it, right here on What's Spinning. But let me know what you think about their discography. If you like the video, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.